everybody. Welcome to our podcast, The Method to Our Madness. I'm Stacey Merola, and I'm here with Bill Pate, my co-host.
Hello.
So, Bill, how was your Thanksgiving?
Francis's family is nearby, so we just had to drive an hour, had a delicious
Okay,
meal, and came home. It was nice. How about you?
awesome. Yeah, I did Friendsgiving out in Doylestown, Pennsylvania, and
Nice.
yeah, it was fun. The day after, we went to a reindeer farm out in the Poconos, and I guess we didn't take into consideration the altitude difference, so we sort of froze our butts off. But the reindeer were cute.
Very nice.
Oh, man. Anyway, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us again. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the history of evaluation, just an overview because people have written whole books about this, and and the Evidence Act, which people have also written quite a bit about. And so, but if you find it interesting, you can definitely go, look up more resources, and I might try and figure out how to post some links on Instagram or something. I got to figure that out. Still
Oh,
working
that's
this
a
out,
great
folks.
idea. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
So
something for the to-do list. Okay.
exactly, exactly. So okay. I think in the last episode we talked a little bit about how, evaluation is a multidisciplinary field. So as during my career, I've worked with other sociologists, economists, psychologists. I think Bill, you're a psychologist, right?
Psychologically trained, yes.
Psychologically trained. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the title is reserved for those with a PhD, so I would be considered a master's level psychologist.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah, that's a good distinction. We don't get anyone mad.
Don't want to get
um,
sued.
don't want to get sued. And so yeah, so psychologists, anthropologists, political scientists, and then yeah, people in sort of like sub genres of those, like educational psychologists, criminologists who used to be sociologists, but now they have their own field, biostatisticians, data, and also data scientists as well have been more recently in the field. And as Bill pointed out, it could be PhD level, it could be master's level. So it's been a multidisciplinary field for as long as I've been in it. And this was really fun for me this week to dive deep into the history of it because you'd think it's a relatively new field, but I guess there's records back to China. Let's see. Yeah, 2200 BCE. 2200 BCE evaluation used was for personnel selection in China. So it sort of brings home the idea that, even though we think we're doing something new or this is, ooh, we've discovered something new, you go back to the source material and go back, you realize, oh, folks have been doing this for a while. Yeah, so again, ancient times, 2200 BCE, evaluation was used in China, personnel selection. And, actually, Shadish Cook and Leviton, sorry if I pronounced your last name wrong, Leviton, in 1991, mentioned that a bit in their preface. I think I need to go back and read that book more because it sounds like it's really interesting, though they mainly focused on evaluation after the 1960s, which we'll get into. But yeah, so after, ancient China, another mention of valuation in history was in 1792 when William Farish introduced quantitative marketing in Cambridge, in England, a key step towards, objective testing. So actually, it was pretty interesting that a lot of early evaluation was related to education, which, both Bill and I have worked most of our careers in doing educational evaluations. And so because yeah, same as today, people wanted to know if students were learning. you know,
Absolutely.
so that was 1792, and it kind of makes sense because it was sort of the age of enlightenment, trying to do use rationality, and then a little bit of a jump in some of the historical records. But I wanted to point out that around this time in the 1800s, you had this is near and dear to my heart Auguste Comte from sociology. One of the
Uh,
yeah. Oh yeah. So the the big three in sociology were always considered big three founders were Weber, Marx, and Durkheim. Though prior to them, there was Auguste Comte, and he put forward the idea of positivism. You can measure things in the real world and gain greater understanding of social processes, and he was one of the first people to use the term sociology. But his idea wasn't just theoretical. I mean, they wanted to use this information to solve social problems.
Mhm.
Uh, and then, as you kind of move on later on into the 1800s, you had more, and I wanted to bring a woman into this because there were a lot of men mentioned. You had Jane Addams in the Hull House in Chicago, one of the first women. I think she won the Nobel Peace Prize actually for her work. But she had set up a research institute in Chicago. The Hull House was considered a covenant house, the immigrant community of Chicago,
Nice.
and yeah, and they did what we would consider today needs assessments. Like they actually went out into the population and asked them, like, well, what do you really need? Like, what are your problems? Instead of just
Getting away from the
assuming.
assuming. That's nice.
Yeah, get
Stakeholder engagement.
stakeholder engagement. Exactly. She was doing this in the late 1800s, folks, and she actually in 1895 she published. Let's see, it was a book of. Hopefully, I gotta get this right here. It's a book of maps. Yeah, it was called Hull House Maps and Papers, and this was a pioneering technique where they actually took maps, and I looked at the maps, and they look like, and I only know this from from doing my genealogical research that I've been doing. That's a whole nother tangent, but it looked like insurance maps for fire insurance. So
Okay.
it gives like the little blocks of like sort of the size of the house and location on the street. But they're like little squares. But they went out and this is early data visualization, folks. In
Yeah.
1895.
And GIS too.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
GIS. They colored them in. They gave them the houses different color, the little blocks different colors. And I think I can put a example of this on the Instagram because it's in the public domain. So they were coloring them in by, different demographic factors. So I have one that's income level, but they also did it by, ethnicity. So Jane Addams, got to get the women in there.
So that was before the Great Fire, right? Wasn't that like early 1900s?
Yeah, it was before the Great Fire.
Oh, I'd be interested in seeing the maps then. It'd be really cool.
Okay, yeah. And so she had a research institute there at Hull House, and so she trained other people. And one of the people that worked there for a bit was Frances Perkins, who went on to, yeah, I know, Bill, you're like perked up. Yeah, she worked on the New Deal with FDR. And so, yeah, she had worked in Hull House early on in her career and also went on to get like I think, a master's in sociology at Columbia. And she was looking at conditions in New York City. So, yeah, so that women were involved with early stages. Well, obviously it wasn't called evaluation back then, but, applied social science research. So, yeah. But then we start getting into the more modern age, I guess, World War II. Well, I guess the 1930s, actually. You kind of had, like, there were competing, in the early 1900s, you had all that stuff about Taylorism, scientific management, and Henry
Yes.
Ford. Henry
I'm
Ford. We're not getting
emotion
into Henry
phase.
Ford, but like, yeah, people trying to use, data to, make processes more efficient. But then I guess there was also the Hawthorne studies, which were sort
Oh,
of, which were sort of the counter argument to Taylorism and Ford that, is more about folks and their social engagement within the work. They changed the lighting in the plants and, that didn't affect worker productivity, but, whether they felt supported by coworkers did. David's
No,
opinion,
that's
I don't
really
agree with.
cool. A lot of that stuff too reminds me that like not only does industrial organizational psychology also claim the time and motion studies and stuff as like early evidence of whatever, but also industrial engineering also points back to these things. So it is really amazing how much overlap there is in our different disciplines and training.
I can only speak from sociological perspective, but we talked about the about sort of the lost tribes of sociology because
I like
organizational
that.
behavior, yeah, the organizational behavior sort of spun off,
Yeah,
criminology sort of spun off.
yeah.
So yeah, the Hawthorne studies, so informal social relationships and group dynamics influence productivity more than just yeah. So then let's see. So then you get into after that, find stuff about Ralph Tyler. I don't know. Some people have looks like some people have called him the father of evaluation. I sort of argue against that because we already have, people in China did it in 2200 BCE. So but
Yeah,
anyway,
I think they got there first.
another scholar noticed Stuffelbeam et al. 2000 noticed that Tylerian evaluation involved internal comparisons of outcomes with objectives, eliminating the need for costly and disruptive comparisons between experimental and control groups. But anyway, I mean, I'm not sure. I haven't read the study myself, but I'm not sure. Back in those days, they didn't have like all the computing power for all the statistical methods we have. So, I'm not sure to what extent they were able to control, but it was innovative that they used, comparison group. So,
No, absolutely. Yeah, I think around that time then, at least definitely pre-computational or intensive computational stuff, that's where non-parametric statistics was useful
oh, cool.
because there would be these different distributions and tables were created and you would just like refer to it and look up, the different values and it would be based on really small sample sizes because it's expensive to do good research, but that allowed people to be able to determine if there was an effect based upon the design and really basic stats. So non-parametric stats was, was something that was
Woohoo!
important in the early days of, I guess, evaluation and assessment.
um, yeah. So 1932, 1940. Some of the material I looked at jumped to the 1950s, but I wanted to point out that some 20th century famous sociologists who were alive during World War II that who participated in the war actually did, and I remember this from my sociology classes. They actually did like surveys of the soldiers and others to figure out the well being of the soldiers. I think Merton might have done that.
So that had to do with like attitudes and perceptions.
Yeah, I think it was attitudes and perceptions.
Okay. Yeah, because like I know industrial organizational psychology likes to claim again the whole personnel selection thing that you talked about like way back in 2200 BCE.
Yeah.
Psychologists were involved with selection processes in World War II because the military really needed to do this effectively and efficiently.
And then, so when we get to I don't know, some stuff from the 1950s, I guess actually, found some stuff. This is more going back to sort of like, making sure your projects are working effectively, like that they're moving along, more like the Taylorism idea. There's something called PERT, Program Evaluation and Review Technique,
Okay.
was a statistical tool used in project management. Yeah, so I guess it's kind of like it's again analyzing the task within your project flow, which I guess is sort of like a little bit like Lean Six Sigma, things like that. Probably is the latest development of that idea. Also, I guess 1957, Sputnik launch prompt U.S. education system evaluation,
Yep.
boosting the field. So,
We're behind, guys. How do we
we're
catch
behind.
up?
Exactly, exactly. Again, it goes back to education.
Yeah, a huge influx of funding and how do we make things better, faster? How do we educate people?
Yeah, so that led into the Great Society program. And so, and this is where, it comes closer to the modern era of evaluation. We had massive, federal investment in all of these programs and need to see whether, what the return on investment was, were the programs working. The age of evaluation began.
The golden age
The
began.
golden age of evaluation began.
Yeah, so accountability of all those education expansions and probably expansion of the federal government to help support stuff. Because I know Department of Education was established like actually a long, long time ago. There might even be mention in the Constitution about like early stuff. Because like standards of education were established like over 100 years ago. The whole like, oh, in high school you need to take algebra 1, you need to take geometry, you have to take algebra 2.
Right.
So this whole idea of like subjects like started like a long time ago, but yeah, it sounds like in the 50s and 60s, post World War II, there was a huge investment into these things so that we could have, I guess, uniform standards, but also just a huge influx of all this funding and then of course accountability.
So, and that kind of leads into, the more modern era. Again, going back to education, the No Child Left Behind Act and, you know, emphasized, assessing the quality of evidence in education. So with the Works Clearinghouse.
Which you know a
And
lot about.
I know a lot about the Works Clearinghouse, yeah. There was a lot of, I remember at the time, there's a lot of controversy over the No Child Left Behind Act. And I think they've sort of pulled back some of the provisions of that. But after the No Child Left Behind Act and the improvement in education, there plus like the concurrent, development of more educational technology. I feel like we've gotten, a lot more education technology companies who have needed, program evaluations done in order to meet the standards of the Works
Yeah.
Clearinghouse. So, and then I think so. Maybe circling back a little bit, I think you can tell from the examples provided here that a lot of the, previous evaluation work has been, a lot within education. Obviously, it's when in, healthcare, that's been one as well. But I think as we get now into the edge, the Evidence Act, it's sort of So, okay, step back again. Because, evaluation was used in education, the workforce, and healthcare, agencies in the US, like the Department of Education, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, Health and Human Services, as examples, had always used evaluation methods, research methods to the effectiveness of their programs. But what the Evidence Act did in 2019, when it was signed into law, it made it so that other agencies in the government had to use evidence to make decisions. And it provided for a lot of other things as well. Chief statistical officers in, in all the agencies. And so, and needing to create learning agendas so that they had, and so learning agendas so that agencies, could decide, okay, well, this is what we're going to focus on, to get more evidence about, and addressing, data silos to try and make government data more accessible and useful for research and policy decisions. Yeah, so before the Evidence Act in 2019, some agencies had a lot more experience with doing evaluations, but now you had everybody needing to do
Yeah,
evaluations.
yeah, it sounds like it was very uneven and best practices needed to be figured out, like you said, uniformly across different federal agencies so that there is transparency and accountability and all that good stuff. You know, we've been doing this since 2200 BCE.
Exactly, we've been doing this since 2200 BCE. So.
Don't we know
Yeah.
people who helped contribute to the Evidence Act? I'm thinking, like, isn't Nick Hart part of that?
Yeah, well, he's the head of the Data Foundation, right?
Yeah, and
Um,
I think, yeah, I feel like I'll of course check this after the fact, but it seemed like that was definitely part of the whole like making it happen system wide. But that's just what I'm remembering.
yeah, I think Robert Shea too was the Gov Navigators podcast slash consulting
Oh,
firm. I
cool.
think, yeah, yeah. So, and this was a bi. We should emphasize this was bipartisan piece of legislation. So,
Yes,
um,
very important.
so it made a big. It was definitely an important addition to improving government, making sure that decisions were made based on data. And there's still work to be done. So I guess.
Absolutely.
So
In 2025, there's work to be done.
there's still work to be done,
There's
people.
always work to be done. Yes.
There's always work to be done. Yeah. So, but because I guess a lot of I guess there was definitely a lot of advancement as far as their learning agendas being created, but there's still probably work to be done as far as using the data to make decisions.
Yeah, I
In
think sometimes we forget that. It's
Yeah.
it's not just doing this, build these reports, bind them in, pretty binders and put them on a shelf. It's like, no, this is because we need to be able to use this stuff and use it effectively and well and make rational decisions based on evidence.
Yes. Implement.
Yeah. Yeah, and also to just yeah, close that loop so that we have
Close the
like
loop.
a nice recursive thing, which was an evolution in even like I think developing logic models because back in the day it's like okay we have these resources, we're going to do these activities, we have these outputs, we have these outcomes, and we're done.
Yeah.
It was like that for the longest time, and then it's like well wait a minute, don't we want to like have this output now to circle back and
Exactly. Exactly.
I wonder when the first instance of recursive or iterative recursive thinking about that was like documented. I'm sure it wasn't 2200 BCE.
No, probably not.
I'm thinking it was a more modern thing, but
I think it might be a more modern
but maybe
thing.
that's like part of like the whole like Six Sigma thinking and what happened in like other industries maybe or something.
Yeah.
Because I feel like there's a lot of like borrowing tools and things and concepts from other disciplines and other groups to improve, evaluation.
Yeah, well, that's actually a good segue. So Sarah Vaca and Michael Quinn Patton developed this periodic table of evaluation. And Sarah Vaca, I guess she created an early version of this, and then Michael Quinn Patton happened, loved it, and then, said, "Hey, can I help you with this?" But it shows you like all the different method, like paradigms, evaluation purposes, sort of all the different methods that can be used, you know, the conceptualizations, the roles. And this definitely goes back to Bill's point about how, like, there are different evaluation draws from methodology and theories from so many different fields that it can be a little bit overwhelming, actually. And so I really like this periodic table because it lines it all out. Otherwise, evaluation could seem kind of amorphous. And like, like, wait,
Absolutely.
you're using that theory. What is that? And
Smart goals, that belongs to somebody else.
yeah, exactly. Like with
Whatever.
somebody else, whatever. Yeah, so this lays it all out. Yeah, so I think definitely, I'll try and put the YouTube links and Instagram or something. So yeah, so I think that's it for today. Next time, it's gonna be a treat. I'm gonna be doing the podcast in Guatemala.
Yeah, that'll be very cool. I'm stuck here in Chevy Chase, but you'll be down there.
Right, right. We talked a little bit about UX research and qualitative methods,
Oh,
and
cool.
yeah, yeah, and what qualitative research is, what it really is. So, I don't know, I feel like I hear a lot of people. I've heard people throw around the idea of like qualitative survey, which is like nails on a chalkboard to me because like a survey is not qualitative data. When, like if you're talking, and I know they're trying to say it's because they're collecting data on attitudes or something, but like that's not qualitative data. So we're gonna learn.
That's quantitative. We
That's
can have that
quantitative,
argument.
folks.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's
We should have that argument.
yeah. There might be a little bit of a break in our biweekly pattern just because of the holiday, but back in the we will have this one episode I record in Guatemala, and then back in then in January, hopefully we'll get on a regular cadence of biweekly nerdiness.
Yay.
Yay!
I'm looking forward to it.
So anyway, so happy holidays, everybody.
Happy holidays.